The black void of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by distant stars that looked like tiny diamonds scattered across dark velvet. In this emptiness, a single human ship waited. The USS Defiance hung motionless, its hull scarred and patched from countless battles. Inside the ship, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the main screen. "Captain, they're coming," said Communications Officer Nina Walsh from her station. Her voice was steady, but Morrison could hear the tension underneath. 300 ships, sir. Maybe more." Morrison nodded slowly. He had expected this moment for months, ever since Earth fell. The Zorathian Empire had finally come to finish what they started. 300 warships against one damaged human vessel. The odds were impossible, but Morrison had stopped caring about odds long ago. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. 20 minutes, sir," replied Weapons Officer Ryan Blake. His fingers moved across his console, checking weapon systems one final time. "All guns are loaded and ready." The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep from various stations. Morrison looked around at his crew. 200 souls, all that remained of humanity's once mighty fleet. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing they would never go home. Each face showed determination mixed with fear, but no one asked to leave. They were here because someone had to make a stand. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Zorathian fleet," Nina announced. "They want to talk." "Put them on screen," Morrison ordered. The main display flickered, then showed the bridge of a massive alien warship. The creature that appeared was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth, and when it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "I am Fleet Commander Vextar of the Zorathian Imperial Navy," the alien said. "You will identify yourself and your vessel." Morrison stepped forward. "Captain Jake Morrison, USS Defiance, and you're trespassing in human space." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human space no longer exists, Captain Morrison. We have destroyed your fleets, conquered your worlds, and burned your cities. You are the last ship, are you not?" Morrison's jaw tightened. He remembered the reports from the outer colonies. Millions of humans dead or enslaved. Entire worlds turned to ash. The images still haunted his dreams. "What do you want, Vextar?" Morrison asked. "Your surrender," the alien replied simply. "Lower your shields, power down your weapons, and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be taken as slaves. Your ship will be added to our fleet. This is your only chance for mercy." The bridge fell silent. Morrison could feel his crew waiting for his response. They all knew what surrender meant. The Zorathians had shown no mercy to any human colony they had conquered. Slavery would be a kind fate compared to what usually happened. Morrison looked at the alien commander for a long moment. Then he smiled. "No," he said. Vextar's large eyes blinked in surprise. "I do not think you understand, human. You face 300 warships. Your single vessel cannot possibly survive. Surrender now, and some of your crew may live." "I said no," Morrison repeated, his voice growing harder. "And let me make something clear, alien. My ship may be alone out here, but we're not going to roll over and play dead just because you brought a big fleet." The alien's expression changed. The surprise was gone, replaced by cold anger. "Then you have chosen death. When we finish with your ship, we will hunt down every remaining human in the galaxy. Your species will be extinct within a year." "Maybe," Morrison said, "but you're going to remember this day for a long time. Every time you look at the stars, you'll think about the ship that wouldn't bow down to you." Chief Engineer Lisa Carter spoke up from her station. "Captain, their lead ships are moving into attack formation. They'll be in weapons range in 10 minutes. Morrison nodded and turned back to the alien commander. "You want to fight, Vextar? You've got one. But don't say we didn't warn you." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence again. Morrison walked to his captain's chair and sat down. He activated the ship's internal communications system. "All hands, this is the captain," he said, his voice carrying throughout the ship. "In a few minutes, We're going to face the biggest fight of our lives. The enemy has more ships than we can count, but they're about to learn something important about humans. We don't know when to quit." He paused, thinking about all the men and women who had died defending Earth and the colonies. "Today, we make our stand. Not because we expect to win, but because someone has to show these aliens that humans don't surrender. Our families are gone, our worlds are burned, but our spirit lives on. Make every shot count. Make them pay for every inch of space. Show them what humans do when they're pushed too far." Around the ship, crew members prepared for battle. In the engine room, Lisa Carter made final adjustments to power systems. In the weapons bays, Ryan Blake's teams loaded the last of their ammunition. In the medical bay, Dr. Sam Rodriguez prepared for casualties they all knew were coming. On the bridge, Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach. The Zorathian ships were massive, each one capable of destroying a city. Their formation was perfect, their advance unstoppable. It looked like a wall of death moving through space. "Sir," Nina called out, "I'm picking up transmissions between their ships. They're talking about us." "What are they saying?" Morrison asked. Nina listened to her equipment for a moment. "They're laughing, sir. They think this is funny. One of their commanders just asked why we're not running away." Morrison smiled grimly. The aliens were about to learn that humans could be full of surprises. "All stations, report readiness," he ordered. "Weapons ready," Blake confirmed. "Engines at full power," Carter added. "All departments ready for battle," Dr. Rodriguez reported, from the medical bay. Morrison looked at the approaching enemy fleet one more time. 300 ships against one. The mathematics of destruction were simple and clear. The USS Defiance would not survive this fight. But that had never been the point. "Here they come," he said quietly. Then, louder, "All hands, prepare for battle. Let's show these aliens what humans are made of." The enemy fleet opened fire and space lit up with the fury of war. The first wave of enemy fire lit up the darkness like a deadly fireworks show. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked through space toward the USS Defiance. On the bridge, Captain Morrison gripped his chair as the ship shook under the impact of enemy weapons. "Shields holding at 60%, called out Lisa Carter from the engineering station. "But they won't last long under this kind of punishment." Morrison watched the tactical display as more enemy ships moved into position. The Zorathians were being careful, using their overwhelming numbers to surround the human ship. They expected this to be over quickly. "Ryan, return fire," Morrison ordered. "Target the lead ship in the center formation." "Aye, sir," Weapons Officer Ryan Blake replied. His fingers danced across his console, and the Defiance's main guns opened up. Bright blue energy beams lanced out toward the enemy fleet, striking the hull of a massive Zorathian cruiser. The alien ship's shields flared and held, but Morrison saw something on the tactical screen that made him smile. The enemy vessel had moved slightly off course, adjusting its position after taking the hit. "Lisa, did you see that?" Morrison asked. The chief engineer was already studying the sensor readings. "Yes, sir. Their shield generators are mounted on the port side of their hulls. When we hit them there, they have to adjust course to protect the generators." "That's exactly what I thought," Morrison said. He activated the ship's communication system. "All department heads report to the bridge immediately." Within minutes, the senior staff had gathered around the captain's chair. Dr. Alex Turner, the ship's science officer, arrived carrying a portable computer. Dr. Sam Rodriguez came up from the medical bay, and Security Chief Ben Collins joined them from his post near the weapons lockers. "Listen carefully," Morrison began, his voice calm despite the enemy fire still pounding their shields. "We're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to hurt them as much as possible before we go down. That means we use every advantage we can find." Lisa Carter pulled up a holographic display of the enemy fleet. "Captain, I've been studying their attack patterns. These aliens are very organized, but they're also very predictable. They follow the same formations, the same tactics, over and over." "What does that tell us?" Morrison asked. "It tells us they've never fought anyone who fights back effectively," Dr. Turner added. "Most species probably surrender when they see a fleet this size. The Zorathians have gotten used to easy victories." Ben Collins nodded. "That's their weakness, sir. They're overconfident. Morrison looked at his officers. These were good people, smart people who had volunteered to die for humanity. But they weren't just going to die, they were going to make it count. "Ryan, what's our ammunition situation?" Morrison asked. "We have enough for maybe 30 minutes of continuous fighting," Blake replied. "But Captain, I've been thinking. We have those mining charges we picked up at the asteroid belt last month." "Mining charges aren't weapons," Dr. Rodriguez pointed out. "No, but they're explosives," Blake said with a grin. "And if we can get them close enough to enemy ships..." Morrison caught on immediately. "How many do we have?" 50 charges each. One powerful enough to crack an asteroid," Blake answered. "If we could deploy them as proximity mines..." "The enemy won't expect it," Lisa added. "Their sensors are looking for missiles and energy weapons, not floating mining equipment." Morrison felt a surge of hope. This was what humans did best, taking things that weren't supposed to be weapons and turning them into weapons anyway. "Do it," he ordered. "Lisa, can you modify our cargo transporters to deploy those charges around the enemy fleet?" "Give me 10 minutes, Carter replied, already heading for the door. "Ben, I want you to prepare boarding teams," Morrison continued. "If we can get close to any damaged enemy ships, we're going to take them." Collins looked surprised. "Sir, our orders were to make a last stand, not to capture enemy vessels." "Our orders were to hurt them as much as possible," Morrison corrected. "If we can take their ships and turn them against the fleet, that hurts them more than just shooting at them." Dr. Turner was studying the tactical display. "Captain, I'm seeing something interesting in their formation. The big ships are staying back while the smaller ones attack first. That suggests their commanders are in the larger vessels." "Which means," Morrison said, understanding immediately, "if we can take out the command ships, the rest of the fleet might become confused." "Exactly," Turner nodded. "Cut off the head and the body doesn't know what to do." The ship shook again as more enemy fire struck their shields. Nina Walsh called out from the communications station. "Shields down to 30%. "Lisa, how much longer?" Morrison asked. Carter's voice came through the comm system from the cargo bay. "2 more minutes, Captain. I'm jury-rigging the transporter to scatter the charges in a wide pattern around the enemy fleet." Morrison looked at the tactical screen again. The Zorathians were closing in, probably planning to finish the battle with a final massive attack. They had no idea what was coming. "Ryan, I want you to concentrate all our fire on that command ship in the center of their formation," Morrison ordered. "Make them think we're desperate and focusing all our attention on one target." "Aye, sir," Blake replied. The Defiance's weapon systems redirected their fire toward the massive alien flagship. The enemy ship's shields flared brighter as human energy beams hammered against them. "Captain, they're taking the bait," Nina reported. "The other ships are moving to protect their flagship. They're tightening their formation." Perfect, Morrison thought. The closer together the enemy ships were, the more damage the mining charges would do. "Charges ready for deployment," Lisa announced over the comm. "Deploy them now," Morrison ordered. Around the enemy fleet, 50 mining charges materialized in space, invisible to the naked eye and almost undetectable on sensors. They drifted silently among the Zorathian ships like deadly seeds waiting to bloom. "Charges deployed and armed," Lisa confirmed. "They'll explode when any ship comes within 50 meters. Ben Collins had returned to the bridge with a portable weapons locker. "Boarding teams are ready, Captain. 20 volunteers armed with plasma rifles and demolition charges." Morrison nodded. Now came the hardest part, waiting for the right moment. The enemy fleet continued their attack, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Their formations moved closer together as they prepared for what they expected to be the final assault. The USS Defiance continued to focus its fire on the flagship, playing the role of a desperate ship making a last, futile gesture. "Shields down to 15%, Nina reported. "Sir, multiple enemy ships are moving into the minefield, Doctor," Turner announced, watching the tactical display. Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "Wait for it," he said quietly. The first Zorathian ship moved within 50 meters of a mining charge. The explosion lit up space like a new star being born. The alien vessel, a cruiser nearly twice the size of the Defiance, simply vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. The shockwave hit 2 nearby ships, crushing their hulls like paper. Then the chain reaction began. As ships moved to avoid the first explosion, they triggered more mines. Within seconds, the organized enemy formation had become a deadly chaos of explosions, debris, and panicking alien vessels. 10 ships were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. 5 more were crippled beyond repair. On the Zorathian flagship, Fleet Commander Vextar stared at his tactical display in shock and growing fury. The single human ship had just destroyed nearly a quarter of his advance force using weapons his sensors hadn't even detected. For the first time in his military career, Vextar began to understand that he might have underestimated his enemy. Fleet Commander Vextar's bridge erupted in chaos as his tactical officers tried to make sense of what had just happened. 15 ships destroyed or disabled in less than a minute. The humans had turned empty space into a death trap, and none of his sensors had detected the threat until it was too late. "Report!" Vextar snarled, his sharp teeth gleaming under the bridge lights. "How did they deploy weapons without our knowledge?" His tactical officer, a younger Zorathian named Kexmol, worked frantically at his console. "Sir, we're detecting residual energy signatures consistent with matter transportation technology. They somehow placed explosive devices throughout our formation." "Impossible," Vextar hissed. "Our shields would have prevented any transport attempt." "Unless," Kexmol said hesitantly, "they transported the devices to positions just outside our shield perimeters." Vextar's large black eyes narrowed. The humans had outmaneuvered him using basic physics and clever timing. No species had ever used such tactics against the Zorathian Empire. Most enemies either ran or fought conventional battles that the Empire's superior numbers could easily win. On the USS Defiance, Captain Morrison watched the enemy fleet's confusion with grim satisfaction. The Zorathians were regrouping, but their perfect formations were broken. Ships were scattered across a wider area, making them less effective as a unified force. "Nina, are you picking up their communications?" Morrison asked. "Yes, sir," the communications officer replied. "They're trying to reorganize, but their commanders are arguing about tactics. Some want to pull back and regroup, others want to attack immediately." Dr. Alex Turner looked up from his science station. "Captain, this is our chance to hit them with everything we know about their weaknesses." Morrison nodded. "What do we know?" Turner activated a holographic display showing detailed scans of Zorathian ship designs. Intelligence Officer Kate Phillips spent 2 years gathering this information before the war started. She infiltrated 3 different Zorathian shipyards and documented every major weakness in their fleet. Kate Phillips had been one of humanity's best spies. She had volunteered for deep cover missions that took her far from Earth, living among aliens and gathering intelligence that Command hoped would never be needed. When the war began, her reports had been among the most valuable assets humanity possessed. "Their shield generators are vulnerable to specific energy frequencies," Turner continued, highlighting weak points on the ship diagrams. Kate discovered that if you hit them with alternating pulse frequencies, you can create a resonance cascade that overloads their power systems. Lisa Carter studied the technical specifications. "I can modify our weapons to match those frequencies. It won't be easy with our damaged systems, but it's possible." "Their command structure has another weakness," Turner added. Kate learned that Zorathian military culture values individual glory above tactical flexibility. When their battle plans fail, their commanders often refuse to adapt because changing tactics is seen as admitting weakness. Morrison smiled grimly. "So they'll keep using the same failed strategies rather than looking weak in front of their subordinates." "Exactly," Turner confirmed. "And there's more. Their communication systems use a hierarchical protocol that Kate was able to decode. If we can jam their command frequencies at the right moments, we can prevent their fleet from coordinating effectively." Ben Collins had been listening from his security station. "Sir, Kate also identified which ships carry their senior officers. The ones with the extra sensor arrays and communication equipment. Target those ships first," Morrison ordered. "Lisa, how long do you need to modify our weapons?" 5 minutes, Carter replied, already heading for the engineering section. Ryan Blake was studying the tactical display. "Captain, they're moving into a new formation. Looks like they're preparing for another attack run. Morrison watched the enemy fleet reorganize. The Zorathians were being more careful now, spreading their ships wider to avoid another mine trap. But their caution was also making them predictable. "Nina, start jamming their command frequencies," Morrison ordered. "Use the patterns Kate identified. Hit them for 30 seconds, then stop for 10 seconds, then hit them again. Make it look like equipment malfunction rather than deliberate jamming." "Aye, sir," Nina replied, her fingers working across her console. Within moments, the enemy fleet's careful reorganization began to fall apart. Ships moved out of formation as orders failed to reach them. Some vessels stopped entirely waiting for commands that never came. Others continued with their last received orders, creating gaps in the formation. "Their flagship is trying to compensate," Ben observed. "They're using backup communication channels." "Which Kate also identified," Turner said with satisfaction. Nina switched to jamming frequency 7. The enemy fleet's confusion grew worse. Morrison could see individual ships breaking formation as their captains grew frustrated with the communication problems. "Weapons modifications complete," Lisa announced over the comm system. "We're now firing pulse frequencies that should penetrate their shields." "Ryan, target the command ships," Morrison ordered. "Use the new weapon settings." The USS Defiance opened fire with its modified weapons. The first target, a large Zorathian cruiser bristling with communication equipment, took the full force of the human ship's main guns. This time, instead of the energy beams scattering harmlessly against enemy shields, they punched through and struck the alien vessel's hull. The cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light and debris. "Direct hit," Blake reported. "Their shields didn't stop us." "Target the next command ship," Morrison ordered. The second target lasted only slightly longer than the first. The modified human weapons cut through Zorathian shields like they weren't there, turning proud alien warships into expanding clouds of wreckage. On the enemy flagship, Vextar watched his command structure collapse. 2 of his senior captains were dead, communication with half his fleet was impossible, and the human ship was destroying his vessels faster than he could count them. "Sir," Kexmol called out, "the humans seem to know exactly where to hit us. They're targeting our weak points with impossible precision." Vextar felt a cold chill run through his body. "They've been studying us," he realized. "This isn't a desperate last stand. This is a planned operation." The truth was even worse than he suspected. Kate Phillips had done more than just gather technical specifications. She had studied Zorathian psychology, culture, and military doctrine. Every piece of information she gathered had been analyzed and turned into a weapon that could be used against the Empire. The humans had known this. Day would come and they had prepared for it. "Sir," another officer reported, "we've lost contact with 40% of the fleet. The remaining ships are requesting new orders." Vextar looked at his tactical display. What had started as an overwhelming victory was becoming a disaster. The single human ship was still fighting, still destroying his vessels and still finding new ways to hurt his fleet. "All ships," he commanded, "close to point-blank range and destroy that vessel immediately. Use overwhelming firepower. Do not give them time for any more tricks." But even as he gave the order, Vextar wondered what other surprises the humans might have waiting for him. As the USS Defiance continued its deadly dance with the Zorathian fleet, Captain Morrison found his mind drifting back to a moment 2 years earlier. The memory came unbidden, as painful memories often do during times of extreme stress. The human. Colony ship Harmony had been traveling to establish a new settlement in the Kepler system when Zorathian raiders attacked. Morrison, then commanding a patrol vessel, had arrived just as the aliens were boarding the defenseless transport. The battle was brief, but vicious. Morrison's ship had disabled the Zorathian raider, leaving it drifting powerless in space. According to military protocol, Morrison should have destroyed the enemy vessel immediately. Instead, he had done something that seemed right at the time. He had offered aid to the wounded alien crew. The Zorathian ship had been badly damaged, with several crew members injured in the fighting. When Morrison learned that their life support was failing, he had ordered his medical team to provide assistance. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been with Morrison for 3 years even then, had treated the alien wounded with the same care he showed, human patience. The Zorathian commander, Zekthar, had seemed genuinely grateful for the human mercy. Through a translator device, he had spoken of honor and respect between warriors. He had promised that this act of kindness would not be forgotten. Morrison had been young then, idealistic, believing that showing mercy to enemies might lead to peace. He had even shared technical information about human medical procedures when the aliens asked, hoping to build trust between the species. Now, as enemy fire pounded his ship's failing shields, Morrison understood the true cost of that mercy. Zekthar had used every piece of information gathered during his time aboard Morrison's ship. The locations of human colonies, the patrol routes of human vessels, the weaknesses in human ship design, all of it had been carefully noted and reported back to the Zorathian Empire. 6 months after Morrison released the alien crew, the Zorathians launched a massive attack on human space. They struck with perfect precision, hitting colonies where defenses were weakest and avoiding areas where human forces were strongest. Entire worlds fell before anyone realized the scope of the attack. The assault on Earth itself had been devastatingly effective. Zorathian forces had bypassed the main defensive fleets and struck directly at the homeworld's communication centers and military command posts. Billions of humans had died in the first wave of attacks, all because Morrison had chosen mercy over duty. "Captain," Dr. Rodriguez called from his medical station, bringing Morrison back to the present. "We've got casualties coming in from the lower decks. Direct hit on Section 7. Morrison nodded, watching his chief medical officer work to save the wounded crew members. Rodriguez had never blamed Morrison for the decision that led to this war, but Morrison blamed himself every day. "How many?" Morrison asked. 12 wounded, 3 critical, Rodriguez replied, his hands moving efficiently as he treated the most serious cases. "They'll live, but we're running low on medical supplies." The ship shook again as more Zorathian weapons found their target. Through the bridge windows, Morrison could see enemy ships moving closer, their hulls scarred but their weapons still deadly. "Sir," Nina Walsh reported, "I'm intercepting a transmission from the enemy flagship. They're ordering all ships to close, to minimum range and finish us off." Morrison studied the tactical display. The Zorathians had learned to respect his ship's long-range capabilities, but they still believed they could overwhelm the Defiance with close-quarters combat. They were probably right, but Morrison had one more surprise ready for them. "Ben, are your boarding teams still ready?" Morrison asked. Security Chief Collins nodded. 20 volunteers with full combat gear. But sir, how do we get them onto enemy ships when we're outnumbered 300 to 1? Morrison smiled grimly. "We let them come to us first." Lisa Carter looked confused. "Captain, if they board us, we'll be overwhelmed in minutes." "Not if we're ready for them," Morrison replied. He activated the ship's internal communications. "All hands, prepare for enemy boarding action. Remember your training, trust your teammates, and make every shot count." Throughout the ship, crew members grabbed weapons and took defensive positions. They had drilled for this scenario dozens of times, though none of them had expected to face it under these circumstances. The first Zorathian boarding craft attached itself to the Defiance's hull, with a metallic clang that echoed through the ship. Cutting torches began slicing through the outer bulkhead as alien soldiers prepared to storm inside. "Multiple boarding craft attaching to sections 4, 7, and 12, Ben reported. "Enemy troops will be inside in less than 2 minutes. Morrison remembered everything he had learned about Zorathian boarding tactics during his studies of the intelligence reports. The aliens preferred to attack in small groups, using superior firepower to overwhelm defenders quickly. They expected their enemies to panic and surrender when faced with their fearsome appearance and advanced weapons. But the crew of the USS Defiance had been preparing for this moment for months. They knew exactly what to expect. The first group of Zorathian soldiers burst through the hull breach in Section 4, their plasma rifles ready, and their sharp teeth gleaming in the ship's lighting. They found themselves facing a corridor that appeared to be empty. Then the human defenders opened fire. The aliens had expected to face panicked civilians or unprepared military personnel. Instead, They met disciplined soldiers who had studied alien tactics and prepared specific countermeasures. Human plasma rifles, modified with alien technology captured in previous battles, proved devastatingly effective against Zorathian armor. Section 4 secure, Ben reported. Enemy boarding party eliminated. Similar reports came in from Sections 7 and 12. The human defenders had turned each boarding action into a trap, using the ship's layout and their knowledge of alien tactics to devastating effect. But Morrison's real plan was just beginning. Ben, take your boarding teams to the alien craft attached to Section 7, Morrison ordered. Their boarding tube works both ways. Collins grinned fiercely. Understood, sir. Let's go give them a surprise visit. 20 human soldiers moved through the ship's corridors toward the attached Zorathian boarding craft. They had studied the layout of enemy vessels and knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The Zorathian crew aboard the boarding craft were focused on supporting their ground troops and didn't expect an attack from the ship they were trying to capture. Human soldiers poured through the boarding tube, catching the aliens completely off guard. Within minutes, the boarding craft was under human control. Enemy vessel secured, Ben reported over the comm system. 12 alien crew members eliminated, and we've captured their communication equipment. Morrison felt a savage satisfaction. The Zorathians had taught him that mercy was a weakness that enemies would exploit. Now he was returning that lesson with interest. Use their communication system to coordinate with their fleet, Morrison ordered. Tell them the boarding action was successful and request immediate reinforcement. Ben's voice carried a note of understanding. Aye, sir. Let's see how many more of them we can lure into our trap. Morrison looked at the tactical display, where enemy ships were moving closer, confident that their boarding parties had secured the human vessel. They had no idea that their mercy had been denied, and that the humans were about to show them exactly what that meant. The captured Zorathian boarding craft became the key to Morrison's next move. Ben Collins and his team had quickly learned how to operate the alien communication system, and they were now using it to send false reports to the enemy fleet. Enemy, command. This is boarding team 7, Ben said into the alien communicator, doing his best to imitate a Zorathian voice. Human vessel is secure, requesting immediate reinforcement to complete capture operation. On the enemy flagship, Fleet Commander Vextar received the report with relief. Finally, his forces were making progress against this troublesome human ship. The boarding action had been more costly than expected, but at least it was successful. Send. Boarding teams 12 and 15 to assist, Vextar ordered. I want that ship completely under our control within the hour. 2 more Zorathian boarding craft detached from nearby ships and moved toward the USS Defiance. Their crews were confident that they were joining a successful operation, not flying into a carefully prepared trap. Morrison watched the approaching craft on his tactical display. Ben, are you ready for more guests? Yes, sir, Collins replied from the captured alien vessel. We've rigged their boarding tube with explosives. As soon as they dock with us, we can take control of their craft, too. The plan was working perfectly. The Zorathians expected their enemies to fight conventional battles using predictable tactics. They had never faced humans who turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. The first additional boarding craft docked with the captured vessel. Zorathian soldiers moved through the connecting tube expecting to find their fellow warriors preparing to storm the human ship. Instead, they found human soldiers waiting with weapons ready. The fight was brief and one-sided. The aliens were caught completely off guard, and the humans had prepared their positions carefully. Within minutes, the second boarding craft was under human control. 2 enemy vessels captured, Ben reported, requesting permission to proceed to Phase 2. Morrison nodded. Proceed. Make them pay for every mistake they've made. Ben Collins had been a security chief for 8 years, and he had learned to think like both a defender and an attacker. The captured Zorathian vessels gave him a perfect opportunity to strike back at the enemy fleet. Using the alien ship's own weapons and communication systems, Ben's teams began attacking other Zorathian vessels. They targeted ships that were isolated or damaged, using the element of surprise to devastating effect. The alien crews never suspected that their own ships had been turned against them until it was too late. Enemy vessel Kexnalar is under attack, came a panicked transmission on the Zorathian command frequency. Unknown attackers using our own weapons. Vextar stared at his tactical display in growing confusion and anger. According to his reports, the human ship was captured and under Zorathian control. But somehow, his own vessels were being destroyed by weapons that his sensors identified as Zorathian in origin. Kexmol, explain this, Vextar snarled at his tactical officer. Sir, I believe the humans have captured some of our boarding craft and are using them against us. Kexmol replied, his voice trembling with fear. It's the only explanation that makes sense. Vextar felt a cold rage building in his chest. These humans were not fighting like any enemy the Empire had ever encountered. They adapted, they improvised, and they turned every Zorathian advantage against itself. On the USS Defiance, Morrison received reports from his boarding teams with grim satisfaction. The humans had captured 6 enemy vessels and were using them to create chaos throughout the Zorathian fleet. But Morrison knew this phase of the battle couldn't last much longer. The enemy would eventually figure out what was happening and adapt their tactics accordingly. It was time for the final phase of his plan. Lisa, what's the status of our engines? Morrison asked. Chief Engineer Carter checked her displays. We've got maybe 10 minutes of full power left. After that, we'll be running on emergency systems only. That's enough, Morrison said. He activated the ship's communication system once more. All hands, this is the captain. We've hurt them badly, but they're going to figure out our trick soon. It's time to show them the most important thing about humans. Around the ship, crew members listened to their captain's words. They had followed him through impossible battles, trusted his unconventional tactics, and watched him turn a hopeless situation into something resembling a fair fight. They came here expecting to find a broken enemy ready to surrender, Morrison continued. Instead, they found humans. And the thing about humans is this: we don't know when to quit. We don't surrender when the odds are bad. We fight harder when we're cornered, and we never ever give up. Nina Walsh looked up from her communication station. Sir, I'm intercepting Zorathian transmissions. They're regrouping for a final assault. All remaining ships are moving to attack positions. Morrison looked at the tactical display. Despite all their losses, the Zorathians still had over 200 ships. The USS Defiance had maybe a dozen captured enemy vessels fighting alongside. It and those were small boarding craft with limited weapons. The mathematics of the battle hadn't really changed. The humans were still outnumbered by impossible odds. But Morrison had one final surprise for the enemy fleet. Nina, open a channel to all Zorathian vessels, Morrison ordered. Channel open, sir. Morrison stood up from his captain's chair and faced the main screen. When Vextar's image appeared, the alien commander looked furious and frustrated. Surrender now, human, Vextar snarled. You have caused enough damage. End this futile resistance. Morrison smiled. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about winning or losing anymore. This is about making sure you never forget this day. Your ship is crippled, Vextar replied. Your weapons are nearly exhausted. You have no hope of survival. Maybe not, Morrison agreed. But we've taught you something important today. You came here thinking humans were weak because we showed mercy to our enemies. You thought kindness meant we couldn't fight. The alien commander's expression shifted slightly. What are you talking about? 2 years ago, I showed mercy to one of your commanders, Morrison explained. Sekathar used that mercy to gather intelligence that helped you destroy my people. You taught me that mercy is a weakness that enemies will exploit. Vexitar's large eyes widened as he began to understand. Thank you for the lesson, Morrison continued. Today, mercy is denied. Today you learn what humans do when we stop being. Morrison nodded to Lisa Carter. All power to engines, full speed toward their flagship. The USS Defiance turned toward the massive Zorathian command ship and accelerated. The alien fleet opened fire with everything they had, but Morrison's ship pushed through the barrage of enemy weapons, its hull glowing red-hot from repeated impacts. Sir, we're on a collision course, Nina reported. Impact in 60 seconds. Morrison looked around the bridge one final time. His crew worked at their stations with calm professionalism, even though they all knew what was about to happen. "It's been an honor serving with you all," Morrison said quietly. The USS Defiance, humanity's last warship, streaked toward the enemy, flagship like a missile made of human determination and alien-taught ruthlessness. The USS Defiance struck the Zorathian flagship like a spear thrown by an angry god. The human ship's hull, superheated by enemy fire and moving at tremendous speed, punched through the alien vessel's shields as if they were made of paper. Impact sent shockwaves through both ships, and the flagship's bridge erupted in flames and chaos. Fleet Commander Vextar was thrown from his command chair as his vessel shuddered and began to break apart. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power systems failed. Around him, his crew worked frantically to assess the damage, but Vextar already knew the truth. His flagship was dying. "Report," he called out, struggling to his feet. "Sir, we have massive hull breaches on 17 decks," Kexmol replied, blood running down his face from a head wound. "Life support is failing, and the main reactor is showing signs of instability." Through the smoke and sparks, Vexitar could see the twisted wreckage of the human ship embedded in his vessel's hull. The USS Defiance had been completely destroyed in the collision, but its final act had delivered a mortal blow to the pride of the Zorathian fleet. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're receiving damage reports from the rest of the fleet. The shockwave from the collision has damaged 17 other ships. 3 are reporting critical failures." Vexitar felt something he had never experienced before in his military career: the cold touch of defeat. The single human ship had destroyed or damaged over 100 vessels in his fleet. Thousands of Zorathian warriors were dead, and the survivors were demoralized and confused. "All ships, this is Fleet Commander Vextar," he said into his communicator. "Prepare for immediate withdrawal. We are leaving this system." "Sir," Kexmol protested, "we still have nearly 200 operational vessels. We could continue the attack." Vextar looked at his tactical officer with something approaching pity. "Against what? The human ship is destroyed. There are no other targets in this system. We came here to eliminate the last remnants of human resistance, and we have accomplished that objective." But even as he spoke the words, Vextar knew they were a lie. Yes, the USS Defiance was destroyed and Captain Morrison was dead. But the human resistance had not been eliminated. If anything, it had been transformed into something far more dangerous. The surviving ships of the Zorathian fleet began their withdrawal, leaving behind a debris field that told the story of their encounter with humanity's last warship. But they also left behind something else: the knowledge that humans were not the easy prey the Empire had expected them to be. Across the galaxy, in hidden bases and secret installations, the remnants of humanity monitored the battle through long-range sensors and intercepted communications. They watched the impossible happen as a single ship held off an entire fleet and struck a blow that the Zorathian Empire would never forget. Lieutenant Amy Stone sat in the communications center of a hidden base on the edge of human space, tears streaming down her face as she watched the sensor readings that marked the end of the USS Defiance. She had served under Captain Morrison for 2 years before being assigned to the intelligence station, and she knew that his final message would be heard throughout what remained of human civilization. "Did you record everything?" she asked the technician sitting beside her. "Every second of it," he replied. "The whole battle, from the first contact to the final collision. It's all here." Amy nodded. The recording would be transmitted to every human outpost, every hidden colony, every refugee ship still running from the Zorathian advance. People needed to know what Morrison and his crew had accomplished. More importantly, they needed to understand the lesson Morrison had taught them about mercy. 3 months after the battle, Amy found herself commanding her own ship, a converted cargo vessel armed with weapons salvaged from Zorathian wrecks. Her crew was made up of survivors from destroyed colonies, refugees who had lost everything to the alien invasion. "Captain Stone," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a distress call from a damaged Zorathian vessel. They're requesting assistance with their wounded." Amy looked at the tactical display. The alien ship was clearly crippled, drifting helplessly in space. Its weapons were offline and its life support was failing. In the old days before the war, human protocol would have required her to offer aid to any vessel in distress. But Amy had learned from Morrison's example. She had studied the reports from the battle where the USS Defiance made its final stand, and she understood the price of showing mercy to those who would exploit it. "No response to their distress call," she ordered. "Continue on our current course." "Ma'am," the communications officer said hesitantly, "there are wounded aliens aboard that ship. They'll die if we don't help them." Amy turned to face her crew. 2 years ago, Captain Morrison showed mercy to a Zorathian commander. That commander used Morrison's kindness to gather intelligence that led to the destruction of Earth and the deaths of billions of humans. Morrison learned from that mistake, and so have I. She looked back at the tactical display where the alien ship continued to drift. They taught us that mercy is a weakness. Today, mercy is denied. The human ship continued on its mission, leaving the Zorathian vessel to its fate. Behind them, the aliens finally understood what it meant to be on the receiving end of the ruthlessness they had taught their enemies. Throughout human space, the story of the USS Defiance spread like wildfire. Morrison's final stand became a symbol of human determination and a reminder that even in defeat, humans could strike back at their oppressors. But more than that, it became a lesson about the true cost of mercy denied. The war between humans and Zorathians continued for 3 more years. The aliens still had superior numbers and technology, but they had lost something crucial in their encounter with Morrison's ship: their confidence. Every time they faced human forces, they remembered the day a single ship had destroyed a quarter of their fleet. Human tactics evolved as well. Gone were the days of showing mercy to captured enemies or offering aid to damaged alien vessels. The humans had learned to be as ruthless as their opponents, and that ruthlessness made them far more dangerous than the Zorathians had ever imagined. When the war finally ended, it was not with human surrender or Zorathian victory. It was with a negotiated peace treaty that recognized human independence and established boundaries that neither side would cross. Fleet Commander Vestan, now serving as a diplomatic advisor due to his experience with human tactics, participated in the peace negotiations. He often found himself thinking about Captain Morrison and the USS Defiance. "Your people fight differently than any species we have encountered," he said to the human ambassador during one of their meetings. The ambassador, a woman named Sarah Miller, who had lost her entire family in the Zorathian attacks, nodded. "We learned from you. You taught us that showing mercy to our enemies was a mistake we couldn't afford to make twice." Vestan understood. The Zorathian Empire had created its own greatest enemy by teaching humans to be as ruthless as they were. The lesson of the USS Defiance would echo through history as a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from mercy granted, but from mercy denied.